report from Peter King. Take from it what you want, but Peter King is reporting that the Houston Texans and the Chicago Bears were close to a deal. Here's the quote from Peter King. Uh, he said this, and this is the type of report that people like. A lot of people don't like the anonymous stuff, but this is what Peter King said. Quotes about GM Ryan Poles from the Bears. Poles told me he had a significant discussion with Houston at number 2 that could have made him trade down twice into the top 10 with both the Texans and Panthers. He couldn't be specific on what broke down, but he did say, quote, I thought there was an opportunity to do something historically pretty cool with a trade from 1 to 2 and 2 to 9. That had potential to add more draft capital this year. And then the possibility that you're sitting there on 3 1s the following year. That had my attention, but my gut told me to trigger on it now, close quote. Now, why does this matter? Why is this significant? I think this is significant. I see some people saying, well, we don't know. Peter King is an interesting guy. Peter King has said a lot of stuff, but he's mentioning Ryan Poles by name, and he's specifically saying that they talked about the Texans and that they had a deal going on. So I'm going to at least believe Peter King that he wouldn't just, directly quote Ryan Poles by name and not be telling the truth. So let's pretend that this is true. Here's why this is interesting, assuming that the report is true. Because based on this, that would mean that Peter King and the Houston Texans like a specific quarterback. That would mean that Nick Caserio likes a specific quarterback, and it isn't an either or type of situation. It isn't a, well, if the Panthers take Bryce, then we'll be good with it. Or if the Panthers take CJ, then we'll be good with it. That means just the fact that the Texans were willing to do that and were trying to do that, that means they like one quarterback more than the other. Now, does that mean that the Texans will then, pivot if someone comes to them to number 2 and maybe go in a different direction? I don't know, but they clearly like one of these guys more than the other to the point where they were willing to trade up and get the guy, which tells me that they likely like one of the guys a heck of a lot more. Now, how much more would be a question. Like, is it enough to where the Texans, if CJ's their guy, if he goes, do they then pivot? Do they look to trade? You wouldn't think so. But do they draft a defensive guy? Do they go Will Anderson? It's just really clear that the Texans do have a guy based on this report. And I think the fact that Peter King is actually saying, who said it, I think that really, really says a lot, says a hell of a lot, and that they clearly like someone. So this like either or thing, they don't function with that. They're willing to do it. I also wonder what the deal was. You can put your comments in. Locker Room on YouTube, #1 source for Texans daily digital content. You can hear me Monday through Friday, 10 to 2 on Sports Radio 610. Joey asks if it's weird that Slowick and Gerard Johnson won't be at the Ohio State Pro Day. I don't think it's very weird at all. Quite frankly, Gerard Johnson knows, and he's a friend of the show. We've had Gerard Johnson. We used to have him in studio weekly back before he went with Indianapolis. He's like a son to my co-host. Was at all 3 of his kids' weddings. Gerard knows CJ and Gerard knows Bryce better than anyone. And you can still visit with the guys before. I don't think it's weird at all. They were at the They were at the combine. They went on Friday, I believe, Friday night. I know people were tripping that they weren't there, right when it started, but they went on Friday night. But as far as knowing CJ Stroud and knowing Bryce Young, Gerard knows both of those guys very, very well. So I would not make too much of them not being at the pro day. They saw CJ throw at the combine. They talked to CJ. They know CJ. Um, they know they've seen these Ohio State guys. So no, I don't think it's weird, especially with how much Gerard knows CJ and Bryce and how long he's known him. I don't think it's that different or that big of a deal. Cam asks if they had a guy, or he states, I should say, this isn't a question. Um, he believes they would have traded up because Poles even said he wanted to. They didn't think any of these guys were worth a first. Um, that's a lot of filling in the blanks. I don't know. I don't know how you can make that assessment based on that report. It just said they didn't say why. But okay. Edward says, appreciate you. Dude, J.O., shout out to J.O. Being at number one is also about control. The Texans would have the ability to explore the prospects without secrecy. The Texans didn't feel strong enough to ensure that or they didn't offer enough. And Chicago knew that they could get what they got from Carolina, and it wouldn't have been worth it because maybe they didn't know who Carolina liked and they didn't want to risk pissing off Carolina and trading to two. So it could have been as simple as like the two-step process. Um, I don't believe this control crap. I think that's ridiculous. I do think the Texans should have kept control by benching Cooks at the end of the Colts thing. We don't have to go into that. Um, but I don't believe you trade up to number one and give up the price without knowing a specific guy. I don't believe that. I don't believe that at all. Because what if you evaluate the guys and you find out, well, we don't like many of these guys too much? I think Carolina knows who they're going to pick, regardless of what they said yesterday. I think the Texans know who they would like to pick, and that's just what I think. Joe says Peter King can eat whatever. Fake media is pushing hard for Texans to bail out the Panthers' stupidity. Um, I do think Carolina's doing a little bit of policing or a little bit of pushing some sort of narrative. But I think they know who they want, um, just like the Texans did. I feel like we'll know right away. Casario not going to go with either or. They either want Bryce or CJ, or they are picking Anderson or trading down. So at least for now, I mean, you're covering all the ground there, sir. But yeah, I I do feel you on that. I think you're onto something, Quincy, and I think what you're saying is at a position like quarterback, you don't just say either or. You don't just say, "Oh, well, we'll take this guy. We'll give this guy the keys to our franchise," and then all of a sudden we're just gonna, go with the next guy. I don't think that's a winning mindset. I think that attitude has actually, if you look at recent history, it kinda hasn't worked. Now, there's been times where the best quarterback has gone, third or fourth. If you're going, to the Josh Allen example or the maybe Herbert, although Burrow went before him. But this like, oh, we'll take either or, like Arizona in '98, the Chargers, I should say, in '98, uh, the 49ers just trading up to 3. Um, I just don't think quarterbacks work like that. Vincent says he thinks they like both of them, but the reason why they wanted to trade to have the comfort, I don't why. If they like both, why? They clearly like one uh more than the other. Matt, you are crazy. I appreciate you. Me amigo. K Hogan, isn't it nice that we finally have a GM that other teams don't trust because they're scared of losing the deal. I don't know if that's the case. I don't know if that's why Nick didn't get the job done. Um, I don't know that Nick Caserio scares people. Um, I just think he couldn't get a deal, but it does kind of tell you how much they screwed up the Indianapolis situation, given the fact that Caserio was even willing to do that. Blue Boy says they signed Corey Littleton. Meh. He's probably the best linebacker on the roster, though. I think Christian Harris has hope. But as far as like veteran, yes, Corey Littleton, even though, it's been a few years, he was a second team All Pro a few years ago. Um, he's better than Christian Kirksey, and he's better than most of what they had. We'll see what happens. He's trying to survive in the lead. He's on his fourth team, in 5 years. I'm with you on the meh, but you are right. The linebacker position is such to where, and this is the case with a lot of positions. It's kind of the case with wide receiver. For as much as I wanted Robert Woods, um, you can minimize it and you can say, well, he used to be this, and you can say that he's not what he once was. But then you can also say, well, the other thing is the Texans roster is such to where uh it's uh it's still beneficial. Um Frungshin says the franchise is so inept they can't tank properly. Yeah, that was bad. And I think the report, if it's true, I think it can confirm that. J Rock, appreciate all the questions today, man. Subscribe and like too. Um, Today was actually kind of a slow day. They did sign Littleton, but other than that, it was a pretty slowish day, uh, especially compared um, to the last one. Um, DOS skills not liking the hat. I like this one, man. It's new. It's a little Texas Ice hat. Big fan of this one. Uh, but we'll see what happens with Littleton. Cam says, I know you don't have quote sources, but did you hear anything about the pyramid situation? I have sources. I'm just not a newsbreaker. I don't pretend to be a newsbreaker. I talk to people. My majority of my opinions are driven by some sort of information or some sort of you know, I try to keep you all as informed as possible. I didn't hear really anything about it though. I'll be honest, it didn't like fascinate me. Like I wasn't sitting there foaming at the mouth saying they got to get Perriman and, don't let him leave town. Um, if from the outside looking in, it appears that maybe there was something with the physical. Maybe they assess the situation, and when they had all the money and they realized they were going to go for Dalton Schultz, they just figured that they could use their money um, in different ways. Maybe D'Amico liked Littleton more. Maybe they just decided that they wanted to use the money on Schultz and use the money on the other guys that they signed yesterday. So I don't, I don't, I don't really know a ton of stuff on that. The Texans have Wild Thing music. The Texans have one of the greatest advantages most other teams don't have. Their coach literally and recently played for the team. You don't see that happen in college. Yeah, I do think it is an advantage. I do think players are going to want to play for D'Amico Ryans. I don't think there's like some sort of tangible proof of that yet. I do think it's probably a little bit more attractive of a destination, but I also think that has as much to do with the assets that they have right now, and the fact that they do have a little bit of young talent. Um, so yeah, I do think players are going to love to play for D'Amico. We've heard a lot of things about it, but I don't know. Like I don't I guess you could say, Jimmy Ward wouldn't have come here had it not been for D'Amico, and you can point to some of the other guys. Um, but I I don't think that that's a bad thing at all. Cam, no disrespect at all, man. I'm not going to pretend. I don't pretend to be something that I'm not at all. Don't no apologies at all. I don't pretend to be the newsbreakers. Some of the newsbreakers aren't even newsbreakers. Some of them are just saying it after the fact, according to sources confirmed after the fact. Like all of them from Schefter down are doing that, and then they're getting like some of them will get like a little. I'm not a newsbreaker. That's not me. I'm a media type slash entertainer. Uh, I cover the squad. Uh, that's me. I'm a radio guy. Um, I'm a streamer, and I go to the games. I cover the games. I'm more so a man of the people. Mr. Heisenberg asks, are there any centers of value left in free agency? No. I don't. I think the draft is where we need to look for that. Maybe when we get closer to camp, we see some center options like increase, but at this point, I don't think they're going to sign a center. They signed the center that they signed yesterday. Uh, I'm not even going to mention his name until we see him actually play an offensive snap. He didn't play one last year. So, yeah, we'll see what happens. But no, there aren't really very many quality centers out there. Mitchell talking about 17 hours without eating. That's discipline. It's 19. I'm on the 5 hours right now. I'm only eating from 2 to 7. Just ate me some El Tiempo though. So yeah, I'm on the 3 weeks of eating from just uh 2 to 7. Jo asking about Roshan Johnson in the third. Roshan ain't going third. I love Roshan. Um, I think you're looking at a day 3 guy in Roshan Johnson. I watched every snap of his college career. He can do a lot of things. Roshan can play special teams at the NFL level. So I think that's going to help him. Roshan, I mean, he can run that rock. He can do a lot of small things for you. I was kind of surprised that Roshan didn't play in the bowl game. I get it when you're talking about like Bijan Robinson. I actually thought Roshan playing a game against Washington where he could have maybe, you know, been the guy that got 25 carries or something in a bowl game. I thought that kind of actually could have helped his stock instead of us sitting here pretending that he can do that. But he elected not to. Uh, not bad, but I don't think Roshan is a third round um, guy. Mitchell's asking, what's my knock on Stroud? I mean, look, I just don't think when I watch CJ Stroud that he has the instincts that Bryce Young has to maximize his skills. Um, I think that I don't think he runs the ball as much as he should. I mean, I know that because he said so himself, and people who cover that squad more than anyone, they say that. I think that there's something about Ohio State. I'm not going to be the guy that says, well, what about an Ohio State quarterback? I'm not going to be that guy, but that Ohio State system does make it pretty easy for you, especially when you have those weapons. Not saying that matters because I think CJ can spin it, but if we're talking about taking someone at 2, or right there at the top of the draft, I personally think that Bryce is the only one that I feel 100% comfortable with. I think CJ has all the tools to be good. I think obviously there's reports that Carolina likes him. I don't think the Texans don't like him, but I'm just not as high on CJ Stroud as a lot of people are. So that's just where I'm at on the CJ thing. Although a lot of people love him. BG asking about Will Anderson at 2. I do wonder, like, and we started this talking about it. They clearly like somebody. They clearly like somebody more than the other. How much do they like him? Is there a narrow gap? Is there a big gap? Um, I don't know. Cam says CJ had LSU 2019 talent around him. Well, I mean, Joe Burrow ended up fine. So I'm not holding that against CJ Stroud. I don't want you to think I'm sitting here and I'm not acting like Bryce Young played with, Texas State talent. Shout out to Texas State. But I'm just saying that it's a little the stuff that Bryce Young had to do compared to what CJ Stroud had to do. I just thought he had to do a little bit more. But whether he had more talent around him, less talent around him, or whatever. Um, that is what that is. I wanted to get into something else. And just a little question I'm asking, and this is something that just kind of came up organically today on the show. Uh, in the loop. Shout out to Texas State. I'm just saying, compared to Ohio State, love Texas State. I would have flunked out there for sure. Been on that river every day. Um, but we were talking about the Texans' talent. We were talking about the schedule. We were talking about the NFL. We were talking about how the Giants went from 4 wins to 10. We were talking about how the Eagles in year one, the year before that, went 9-8 with Nick Sirianni when nobody expected it. And just basically how teams constantly go from like worst to first in in uh in a matter of like no time in the NFL. Like we were talking about that. Um and I asked the question about the state of the division. And I just asked the question, like, are we 100% sure that the Jags uh, are for real? Michael's asking who Littleton is. Try Google, sir. But I'm not trying to take anything away from the Jags, and I'm not even saying that the answer is no. But if we're to look at what happened last year in the AFC South and the fact that the Jags won the division, I think we can agree that Trevor Lawrence, whether you're ready to say that he's a franchise quarterback or not, Trevor Lawrence is a really, really, really good quarterback at the very least. Now, is he going to end up being in the same category as Joe Burrow? I I guess you can look at that playoff win and say, well, Trevor Lawrence was awesome, but you also got to look at that first half and see that he threw 4 interceptions. You also got to look at the Kansas City game where they were going toe to toe with the Chiefs and say, well, Patrick Mahomes was playing on one leg. So as much as, they can convince themselves, and I've seen this before, well, we went toe to toe with the Kansas City Chiefs in the postseason, so we must be close. See, Texans in 2019, Patrick Mahomes was on one leg, and in that Chargers game, that was as much about the Chargers choking as it was the Jags winning. I do think Trevor Lawrence, obviously in the second half, it was elite, but before that, what did he throw? 4 interceptions. So if we look at the Jags and we look at what they did and how they won the division, damn, Japan got that WBC. I've been distracted by that, but there we go with Japan and that WBC. What an event, though. But if Ryan Tannehill doesn't get hurt last year, what are we saying right now about the Jags? Because the Titans had to play 5 games with Malik Willis and then 1 game with 5 games with either Malik Willis or Josh Dobbs. If Ryan Tannehill doesn't get hurt, we're not talking about the Jags winning the AFC South. We're just flat out not. Malik Willis couldn't throw for over 50 yards in a game, and the Jags ended up winning the division. And they deserve credit for that. And maybe they can build off of that. Maybe that's the beginning. But in the NFL right now, and Tennessee might be even worse. So, and Jacksonville could get better. So that could widen the gap. Same thing with Indianapolis. We don't know what's going to happen with the Colts, but are you comfortable in just saying that the Jags this is the Jags division for years to come based on the breaks that they got? And I don't know if breaks happen in the NFL, but are you comfortable in saying that? I'm not. Now, when we start doing predictions and we start looking at teams and stuff, is there a chance that this could eventually be the Jags division for a long time? Yeah, there is. And am I probably going to pick the Jags? Yeah, I probably am. But I'm not comfortable just sitting here saying that, despite the fact they have a lot of things to be encouraged about, I'm not comfortable just sitting here saying that the Jacksonville Jaguars are this is their division. Like, this is the AFC South is theirs there for a long time. Trevor Lawrence played historically bad in one half. Then he played historically good in the second half. They played the Chiefs where Patrick Mahomes had one leg. Ryan Tannehill got hurt. Tennessee was in firm control of the division. As soon as Ryan Tannehill goes down, Tennessee falls apart. And it came down to a game at the end of the year where Josh Dobbs was making his first ever career start, and winning that game is what got Jacksonville in the division. That's not something that you just look at and say, okay, it's a foregone conclusion that the Jags are going to be the team to beat. Would you bet on it? Probably. Like, if you had to make a bet, like if your life depended on it, you probably would. But as far as, this is, I don't get the feeling that I had about the Jags like I had about the Texans in 2018 before B.O.B. and Jack screwed stuff up. Like in 2018, when you saw Deshaun Watson, even though the Colts came and beat the crap out of the Texans at NRG, you felt like that was the Texans division because the Texans went toe to toe with a team that had Andrew Luck, and they ended up winning the division, and they won the division the next year. And then the POS, Jack Easterby and Bill O'Brien tore this thing down, but you felt good about the Texans. I feel good about Trevor Lawrence. I don't feel as good about Trevor Lawrence. Even me being a Trevor Lawrence guy, I don't feel as good about Trevor Lawrence as I did Deshaun in 2018. I feel like in 2018, when we were talking about Deshaun, 2019, we were saying, man, this is a top 5 quarterback. This is going to be a top 8. What is Trevor right now? Top 12? Top 15? We'll see what happens. We'll see what happens. But I'm not ready to just like bow down to the Jags at all. Now they do have a lot going for them compared to the other squads. I think the Texans have obviously gotten better with all the moves they've made. There wasn't really much room to get worse, if we're being honest. Tennessee and Indianapolis have been a disaster. They're in a weird spot, but we'll see what happens. 44 Trey says, "Man, hell nah, we beat the Jags." Even while being sorry, Jags taking over the division is a no for me. I can agree with that. Um, the the Colts aren't to be dismissed either. Based on what? Based on what? Jonathan Taylor coming back, which is a big deal. I mean, that could be the reason. Their offensive line isn't good anymore. That's what's that's what's going on. That's one of the problems with the Indianapolis Colts is for a 3-year stretch, on the back end of Andrew Luck and then the post Luck days, you didn't have the quarterback, but you still had the good O line. Now you're trying to find the quarterback. You're kind of fighting an uphill battle there because it looks like you're going to have to take the third or fourth best in the draft, depending on what you do with Lamar. And your O line isn't elite anymore, and your players are getting older. Like, a lot of those core guys are getting older. So I'm not going to dismiss the Colts. I'm not going to put the Texans above anyone. I mean, they've got to go out there on the field and play better. Uh, but I I don't I don't see anything from the Colts uh, that makes me feel, scary. Titans should just completely tear down and rebuild, Steven says. I don't know what the hell they're trying to do, quite honestly. And I also think they're kind of in a rough territory where one of your strengths is kind of going to prevent you from doing what probably needs to happen. It's kind of like Mike Tomlin in Pittsburgh. Like, Mike Tomlin doesn't have losing seasons. And because of that, Pittsburgh's always in like that middle range where you draft Pickett and you cross your fingers and you hope that Pickett is the guy. We know Pickett's not going to be the guy. He's not going to be like one of the top 15 quarterbacks in the league, top 12. But Mike Tomlin's such a good coach that you're going to be scratching and clawing. You're going to play your way into the playoffs, like they have before, where you don't have a chance, and then the season's going to end, and you're probably going to think you're a little bit closer than you are. But the most important thing, a quarterback, you don't have, and that's where Vrabel is right now. I think Vrabel is enough of a scrappy coach that Tennessee's kind of going to be in that interesting area. I don't know what the hell they do at quarterback. They're having to cut a lot of guys. Tennessee, the arrow is pointing way down on Tennessee. I don't know what the F they're going to do. With that said, if they do run it back with like guys they got, and if Derrick Henry, my God, if he's just continues to look like freaking Adrian Peterson, where he can just carry a team to 8, 9 wins, whatever. And if they get competent quarterback play, they could easily scrap and win this division. But then what? I mean, it kind of goes back to that mediocre treadmill that we were talking about. Okay. You win 9 games, you win 10 games, you scrap it out. Everybody's talking about Mike Vrabel being coach of the year, but it's obvious. Even when you go into an AFC championship game, even when you're the 1 seed like they were 2 years ago, like as much as it's got to be disappointing to be the 1 seed and then lose to a rookie quarterback in Cincinnati. Nobody thought that Tennessee was legit. Like nobody was picking Tennessee to win the Super Bowl despite being the 1 seed. They overachieved to do that. And their ceiling when they get into the playoffs is small. That's not the case with Jacksonville. I mean, Trevor Lawrence can flip the switch and he can play like he did in the second half against the Chargers. So for all the talk about who knows what's up with them? They at least have a high ceiling because of what Trevor Lawrence can be. Titans don't have that. I mean, you can make a case that the Titans are in the worst place of any team in the AFC South right now. They don't have a lot of assets. Salary cap situation sucks. They had what they thought was like a window of competing at the top. That window appears to be shutting. It's at the very least a crossroads. Indianapolis at least can convince themselves that, maybe Anthony Richardson can come in there and be the savior with Shane Steichen. They can maybe kick the tires on Lamar Jackson. The Jacksonville Jaguars still have Trevor Lawrence, and the Texans probably going to maybe have a quarterback at number 2. Tennessee's in the worst spot. A lot of people not scared of Trevor Lawrence. They don't know. Derek talking about the McClain challenge today. Yeah, I like John McClain. If you missed that, it's on the Odyssey app. McClain comes in there. We take him to task. We don't just let John McClain come in there and answer generic questions. He comes in there. He enjoys it. We have fun. Love that guy. He's a good dude. Derek talking about we have to see how division teams fared against the presumed scheme we will be running. Not sure exactly what that means, but sure. Cam's praying the Colts take Levis or Richardson. I'm fine with. I'm not really that terrified of them taking either one of those guys. Now, if they would have traded up and gotten Bryce or even CJ, then who knows? But I don't know. Love is asking, what were the Texans willing to trade up to get one? Don't know. Peter King didn't say that. So we have no clue. Good point. Jags also got the tougher schedule. Blue Boy 59 says Trevor Lawrence is like an old Chevy. Once he warms up, he'll take you where you need to go. Hey, I'm a Trevor guy, but that was pretty bad what we saw in the first half against the Chargers. That was pretty bad. So we'll see what goes on there. Why was there no talk about Bobby Wagner? I know he's old, but he's a leader. Why would Bobby Wagner want to come here would be my question. I like Bobby. I would love for Bobby to come here. I would love for Bobby to be one of the leaders. He can still play. I thought it would be foregone that he would go to the Cowboys because he knows Dan Quinn, and that was his second choice last year. but why would he want to come here at this point in his career? The Texans, although the quality of free agent is better, if there's a guy who can just go chase a ring 100%, and who knows how much you got to give Bobby for a 1-year deal or 2-year deal, the question would be, why would Bobby want to come here? I think that's really the most valid way to ask the question, not just from the Texans' point of view, but why would Bobby want to come here? I think sometimes we do this, and I'm saying we. I'm not saying you people. I'm not like gonna separate myself uh from this. I've done this, but I think sometimes when we see like a dollar amount on a contract or a player or whatever, sometimes we pretend, well, damn, I would have paid that. Like you see a guy sign for like 1 year, $8 million. Saw it with Gardner Johnson. It's like, well, damn, I would have paid 8 million for that. Well, maybe he didn't want your ass. It takes two to tango. And sometimes, like when you're in the Texans situation, just like the Jags last year, with some of the guys they had to pay, sometimes there's a tax. So I don't know. Like if I'm Bobby Wagner, I love Houston. I like being here. There's not anywhere else that I would rather be, but I would not want to come to Houston for what? I'd want to go somewhere where they made the playoffs, and I think that I could finish off with a ring. Maybe the Texans get to the point where that's the situation, but from Bobby's POV, I just don't see why he would want to come here. Love Dave. We're big in Chicago, by the way, because of the final the final game where the Bears were just coming in here, soaking up our tears. Locker room, by the way, subscribe, like. Uh, Love Dave says, listening to the Bears media, they said the Texans weren't showing any urgency, so the Bears thought they were getting played. That's fair. Um, that could be a situation that happened. Sean says, should we be concerned the Texans could outsmart themselves at 2 and draft Levis instead? I don't know. I hope not. I would think not. Uh, but we don't like. I said this yesterday, and I said this today when we talked about the Nick Caserio, and we were doing the Nick Caserio, trying to figure out Nick Caserio and learning his tendencies. We don't know what kind of quarterback Nick Caserio has. Like a lot, like over time, people think that they can figure out the tendencies of what someone wants at quarterback. Uh, we don't know. So I don't think that they would take Will Levis. If they did take Will Levis, then this would be a very interesting show because you would probably see me kind of lose it because I think that would be hilarious. Uh, I wouldn't bet on it. I'll just put it that way. I wouldn't bet on. I could see a Levis slide. Honestly, I could see a Levis slide, significant slide. I mean, it happens every year with the quarterbacks. Remember when Malik Willis gave the homeless person his Nike swag bag or something, and then all of a sudden people were talking about him being like he was a top 10 pick last year. Remember that combine story? That's kind of the combine story we forgot. When there was talk about Malik Willis going first round, he had his pro day. He did like the chest bump with Quincy Avery, and then he gave his swag bag to a homeless dude, and he seems like a good dude, but it's clear that guy has a lot. At best, he has a hell of a lot of work to do before he becomes a serviceable QB. Because if you get 2 more years of what you saw from Malik Willis last year, he's not going to be in the league very long at all. He's not going to be in the league very long. But I just remember the combine, the hype and stuff like that. Like one of these quarterbacks has got to fall, right? Are we really going to get 4 guys in the top 10? Are we going to get 4? Shout out to Love Dave, Chicago Bears fan. Got to be fun for you guys. You guys are very active. We'll see how it pays off. But it's been a really fun offseason around here. Shout out to Chicago. It's got to be incredibly fun for you guys. So shout out to Love Dave. Shout out to my guy Eberflus. And shout out to Chicago Bears fans. What a time to be alive. I know you guys are enjoying this as well. Christian says, if the Texans take Levis, I lose faith in Nick, but I die from laughter at the sheer stupidity. Yeah, it would be pretty funny because the thing that would be the most hilarious about the thing is like it would kind of be like you're kind of conditioned to laugh like that about stuff that the Texans do. Really going back to the Easterby and Bill O'Brien era, but like you feel like those are things of the past. But if the Texans did decide to take Levis, you'd be pissed. It would almost be like, here we go again. Same old, same old. Same old Texans is what we'd hear. Same old Texans. Same old, same old. Fred says, trust me, if the Texans wanted to trade up, they could have. Okay, I trust you, I guess. What are you saying? I mean, of course they could have. what what is that saying, Fred? Shout out to you, man. But what does that mean, sir? Trust me, if the Texans wanted to trade up, they could have. Yes, they could have. That is very true. They could have. They also could have traded back. They could have. They could have forfeited their pick. Yes, that's true. They definitely could have. Mr. Robot says, I'm always thinking the Texans will outsmart themselves because that's their history, acting like the smartest dummies in the NFL. Is that fair, though? I mean, didn't Charlie Casserly kind of do a decent job drafting Mario Williams? I know the initial reaction was rough, but it ended up being the right pick. They took J.J. Watt. They got booed. And how'd that work out? They traded up for Deshaun. I think we have a couple of years of that. I think the Easterby O'Brien era was so stupid, and you had such incompetence that we feel like it's a lifetime thing. But I don't necessarily think that's the case. I don't think it's like a historic thing. Now, coming up short, maybe a lack of relevance, maybe being kind of the stepchild to the Indianapolis Colts and a second thought in the league and never being to a conference championship. I think that's true. But as far as just doing idiotic, moronic things, I think we had a small sample size that was such a pathetic example that it's almost just like enough to last a lifetime. Fred back at it, explaining himself. You crying they didn't throw a game. Who cares? They'll take best player available when they ever draft. I haven't said anything about throwing a game. I just said they should have set out Cooks. You're in your own world there, Freddie. They'll take best player available whenever they draft. You're full of the info today. I don't I don't I mean I'm just mingling with the people. My lady's kind of mad, but I'm not even talking about that. Old Fred. Appreciate you though, sir. Jack Easterby for president. No, thank you. Frankston says if Matt Schaub hadn't hurt his foot, we could have an AFC title. That's a fact, man. That's a fact. They were rolling. They were the best team in the league at that time. So I'm 100% with you. Christian says, I'm glad we're rebuilding the defense. There will never be an excuse for a collapse like the Texans Chiefs division game would happen to D'Amico led defense. There's a real and I said this the day after, and I think it needs to be acknowledged. The offense is what cost them that game. I know we focus on the defense. We talk about the defense. The defense wasn't great, but the offense sucked. It sucked. If you go back and look at that game, the Texans blocked a punt and scored a touchdown, the Lonnie Johnson touchdown. Now they scored on their opening drive. They did score on their opening drive, which was nice, but they blocked a punt to score a touchdown. The Chiefs fumbled a kick return, and then the offense just disappeared. Bill O'Brien didn't have a play when it was 21-0. He didn't have a play on 4th and 1. And then they faked a punt with Justin Reed and gave the Chiefs the ball deep in their own territory. So, and then the offense just disappeared. I think they scored 7 points in the second half, and it was all fake hustle. So as much as we talk about the offense sucked. Like the defense and special teams got you that lead, and the offense, they didn't do any favors. Bill O'Brien peed his pants, and the moment was too big for him. He had mom spaghetti all over his coaching shirt in that Chiefs game. The offense was just as bad. I think the offense is just as important. Yeah, the defense folded. The offense did them no favors. And the offense wasn't the reason they took the lead. They had a short field multiple times if you go back and watch it. So there's that. People talking about Easterby. Nah, he was an interesting dude. Got a lot of takes on the Easterby situation. CJ is going to be special. Young is small and a huge risk being small, but that's up to the Panthers. Pray for Stroud. I don't want to get into it. Bryce's small thing today. We got too much time. I'm kind of worn out on that. Mr. Robot says people forget Deshaun Watson was leading that offense, then praised him later if we won an important game in his NFL career, which he never has. I would say Deshaun won some pretty nice games. I don't think that's fair. I know that Deshaun, like people don't like the way that Deshaun left, but I don't think it's fair to say Deshaun never won a big game. I thought Deshaun. I felt pretty safe going into most Sundays with Deshaun. There were some times where they came up short, but yeah, I'm not going to sit here and say Deshaun never won a big game. But that's really all I got. I do want to touch on before we get out of here. Mel Kiper's latest mock draft. Mel Kiper has the Texans getting Bryce Young, which if you were in here yesterday, you know I'm okay with that. And Nolan Smith, which I would be okay with. You would get another SEC guy, and you would get Deshaun Watson. I would be A-okay with that. I like that mock. Although I would say not getting a receiver at 12 with how the receivers look right now, a little bit scary. Maybe trade up back into the first round or something. But I would be okay with that for sure. It would be all right. JJ's going back to this Deshaun thing. I didn't know we were going to talk about Deshaun today, but hey, it's a slow day. I'm good with this. Deshaun won the Bills playoff game, but I hope he stinks. Yeah, he won that game himself. In spite of that. The Midnight A says, I'm more worried about his footwork. If you watch the film, you'll see Bryce's footwork isn't as good. It can get better. You ain't watching no film, sir or ma'am. You ain't watching no film. Don't say you're watching film. That's the worst thing people do right now is say I'm watching film. I'm not watching film. There's a group of people that watch film. They give good scouting reports. You watch the games and all that. I'm not going to sit here and be one of these fake ass media types. If you watch the tape, no, but you listen to people that watch tape, you get their assessment. There's not been a single person, and there's never been an instance where someone's talking about Bryce's footwork. You're just making that up. Come on, dude. if you watch the film, his footwork. Come on, man. That's shameful to make something like that up. But I'm saying that as some you're an anonymous person, which is fine. I'm not questioning that. I wouldn't show my face and say something that silly. My face is that's crazy. If you watch the film, his footwork sucks. Footwork can't suck when you're that short. Uh, Bryce has to do everything perfectly if you watch the film. Come on, man. The Texans have so much work to do, build the roster back up. Bill killed the team. That's a fact, uh, my friend. Um, Bryce Young, height, taking over. We'll get this going. Cam says he's against Deshaun for multiple reasons. That's fine. I don't fault you for that. I don't question anything. Um, I just I'm just talking about as far as him being an actual ball player. He was good here, and I think we can at least admit that. I would say, uh, and I have no problem um, doing that. Appreciate everyone for coming through. Subscribe, like, it's right along. Quiet day today. We'll get back in it tomorrow, 10 a.m. In the Loop Sports Radio 610 and the Odyssey app. And no matter what happens, whether you're fake watching film, whether you're watching the Texans, whether you're following the offseason, keep it locked here on the Locker Room. And no matter what happens, we're all in this together. Have a good night, folks.